Well, good morning, everybody. And I'm sure you're going to be anxious to get to your lunch, so I promise I'll finish on time. And what we're going to do is very interesting hearing Ian, because although we're in a very different sector, a very different space to what Ian's doing, there's a lot of overlap. There's a lot of similar messaging coming through. Some of it's different in terms of speed. Some of it's different in terms of percentage breakdown. But there's a lot of things, similarities going on, and that gives me a lot of confidence that actually we're all here in the same room in this place today, and it makes some sense. So I'm going to tell you a little bit of a story, and every good story begins once upon a time, okay? This isn't a fairy story, and I can't promise there'll be a completely happy ending, but at least we'll give you some signposts along the way. So once upon a time, we had ledgers. Now, these are not the ledger systems that Ian was talking about. This is just the physical books where we originally wrote down the business of the business. So we had a record and we knew what was going on. Of course, that didn't stay still. Okay? Mainframe, this is now in the National Museum of Computing, would you believe? ICL 2900. Okay? So things have moved on hugely, and there's no prizes for guessing what this is. And of course, this was the beginning of the real democratization of data. This was the start point where data was taken out of the enclave and given to the people. Now, we've gone through many iterations since then, new tools to help, but ultimately, everything results in data. Now, we know how much data production is exploding. We're hearing that constantly now, the exponential growth of data production. What we're here to talk about is how do we manage that? How do we really get to grips with that production? Because that's going to be, by the time you go back to the office, it's going to be growing faster than when you left. That's a kind of scary thought. Okay, but there are ways that we can do that, and we're going to go through some of that today. Okay, so maven, okay, a simple definition. The key thing from our point of view is the accumulation of knowledge. What you'll have noticed ever since we moved from ledgers into machinery, into technology, is that we have accumulated. More and better than anything else, accumulation is the thing that we've been good at. We've been good at collecting it and storing it. So, of course, if we're going to collect it and store it, we've got to organize the thing. We've got to find a way to make sense of all the information that we have. So, let's look at two axes. On the y-axis, we've got the importance of the information to the organization. And on the x-axis, we've got the complexity. Okay? So we're going to start out simple spreadsheet. Everybody can do a simple spreadsheet. If you can't do a simple spreadsheet, hold your hand up and we can go through that at the lunch break. But everybody can do a simple spreadsheet. Now, spreadsheets can get very complex, obviously, but we can take the simplest data container in common parlance as being a spreadsheet. Of course, when you grow up from that, you want to put that into a database. So you hire some people that can organize that for you, and so on and so forth. You need somewhere to put a database. So typically, you go and buy a server. And then you get to the point where that becomes mission critical, and of course you then cluster it. Or you put high availability in, or whatever. Then that's not enough. So maybe you go to data appliances, and you get into specialist data management technology, deliberately geared, bespoke hardware that is going to do the job better than the thing that you had before. And then you go and build a warehouse. Now, you might do these things in a different order. It kind of doesn't matter. Your path through this puzzle is going to be different. That doesn't mean to say that you can't take some standard and common techniques and processes and methods to help you with where you are. And you can do it right here and right now. So there isn't any reason or any need to wait. What you'll have noticed through all of this is that that little spreadsheet guy has risen in importance. And even after you've done all of this work, you still have mission-critical data in spreadsheets. It's a kind of scary thought that after all the money, all the time and the effort that we've put into this, we're still in that situation. We're going to come back to that a bit later. But it's important to note when you're planning out these things that you've got really important information in those places. So far, we've only talked about data within the enterprise. Arguably, this is data you can control. After all, most of it you produce some way or other by some business process. So from that point of view, you ought to be able to control this. You ought to have a handle on what's going on. But increasingly, data is out there. Relevant data, important data. Okay? Maybe you've bought into Salesforce. So you already have key business data in the cloud. You almost certainly have some form of web analytics, whether it's Google or something else. Maybe your organization has already moved into Twitter and Facebook. If it hasn't, it probably is thinking about doing exactly that. If it hasn't already bitten that bullet, the question is going to come about, well, why should we do it? What's the benefit? But equally, the other side of that coin is, well, people are talking about us. What is it they're saying? Or maybe it's even, I hope they're talking about us. Maybe they're not saying anything at all. Just as a slight aside, did anybody do the Time Manager course and recognize this form? Anybody in the room do that? Yeah, a couple of people. Okay. And there's a little guy right at the top, and it's a bit small. It's an elephant. And the idea was that you should tackle big tasks when they're little and on the horizon, because once they're on top of you, they can trample you. So you should start big tasks early on and go through. And I was reminded of that because, of course, there's a new elephant in the room. And for those of you that are not already aware of the logo, this is the Hadoop logo. And this, of course, is the distributed file system, which allows you to do massively parallel processing and do large amounts of number crunching very, very quickly. But it's essentially a different technology to a lot of the other things that we're used to. And of course, you typically run it on something like an EC2 cloud or a Rackspace cloud. So again, you've now got yet more data which is out there. These two pressures, the never-ending expansion of internally produced data, plus the new data sources and the new requirements to look at data outside of your enterprise, this is why we've got this kind of umbrella term of big data. And just to pick up and review some of the things that Ian was talking about, there's been a set of definitions, and it might be that it's time to move on from some of these definitions, but nevertheless they provide a useful lingua franca for some of the things that are going on. And again, your situation, you won't recognize all of these. Some of them you'll go, yeah, that applies to us, or that one, or those two in combination apply to us, but not everything. Because this is not a one-size-fits-all. Big data is multifaceted. There are many points. Doug Laney's original paper was called 3D data management. That's what it was all about. What he was stressing was it's no longer about a single thing. Okay, so volume. If it's just a bit more than you can handle, you'll get a spill. You can't write in the margins of computers. So volume at any level is more than you can handle. What we've noticed at every level in business is that the pace has got quicker. Everything is faster. And data is no exception. Because with data, it's now coming at you much faster than ever before. In some cases, it's very peaky. And you can get peaks which are 10, 50, 100 times the norm. How do you handle these things? What do you do? Where do you put it? And how do you get it through your infrastructure? And then, of course, with the external unstructured data, we've got semi-structured, unstructured, natural language, tagged, sentiment analysis, all sorts of things. Maybe in the past, we could say, this is our standard format, or this is how we're going to manage our data. But nowadays, there are too many sources that are outside our control that are mandating the data format for us. So we don't have that option. And of course, the other consultancies have gone on and expanded on the theme. So they've added things like variability, which is the meaning in context. So if this is where it always is an interesting question when people talk about single version of the truth or one version of the truth. I actually know an organization that built a system called OVOT, one version of the truth. And guess what? It wasn't. And for me, part of the reason for that is that actually there is more than one version of the truth. And if we don't recognize and embrace this, we're actually going to come unstuck. What do I mean by that? Simple question. How many customers do we have? That would seem an obvious question, an obvious thing to say. Okay. But if you talk to the operations director or the COO and say, how many customers, you'll get the answer that says, this number of people or this number of organizations are currently transacting with us. Because his or her role is to service a finite body of active participants. You go and talk to the marketing director or the CMO, and she'll say a different number. Because they just had a massively successful campaign and signed up lots of new customers. None of those customers have transacted yet. But even with that very simple question, talking to two different people, you can legitimately have two answers. If your systems don't cater for that kind of variability, then you will come unstuck. Value is the key one for us, because without value, what's the point? So we've built all this infrastructure. If it doesn't serve the business, if it doesn't serve the user population, the business users, the customers, the suppliers, there is no point in doing what we're doing. Volatility is all about the time dimension of data. How long is it valid for? Because these days, with the speed of things that are changing, it goes very quickly. Validity. Validity meaning when you look at it in terms of regulatory context or other rules, is it actually a true answer? Viscosity is a measure of how hard it is to push this data through your infrastructure. Where are the bottlenecks? Where do things break down? But the key thing is value driven by visualization, which is a good point to say, well, who are we? Because you've probably never heard of, never heard of us. Okay, founded 3 years ago, and we're here to disrupt. That's what we do. We're not about incremental change. The idea of the very existence of flying binary is to take what's going on and revolutionize it. Because the tools and technologies exist today to do that. This is not some academic project that's going to be delivered in 5 years' time. These things are on the shelves right here, right now. We're using them every day. And if you're not, you could be too. There's a number of things that we do. Two key ones: social intelligence platform. The data that's out there, all the stuff that people are talking, of course, that's in different services and different systems, and it's unstructured and all that kind of thing. And one of the things that we do is we pull all that together and we structure it and we give it back in a way that you can actually see what's going on. The same thing with talent management. Every organization in our geographic region, the biggest cost is people. If you don't manage that cost, then you are letting resource slip through your fingers. Now, I'm not suggesting that anybody's not doing these things. Of course, everybody is. We've seen the journey that we've all been on, and of course, everybody is doing these things. The question is, in today's business environment, can you get another competitive edge? And the answer is, of course, you can. We're an Acxion VectorWise and Tableau partner. Acxion are the guys here. Okay, and we're going to come on to that in just a second, and Tableau as well, and we'll see that. The key thing then is there is no shortage. Okay, if anybody thinks they don't have enough data anymore, come and see me afterwards. I will tell you where your data is, because there is no question that you have enough. The point is, how do we get to the real insight? Because it's very much like diamond mining. You have to shift tons of dirt to find a real gem. And the problem with that is, as there's more data coming at you, you've got more noise. How do you get through to the signal? Well, let's go for another round of consolidation. Here's the data warehouse we built earlier. And let's suppose that we have a project and we identify a number of other key enterprise data sources that we want to have available in the data warehouse. So we could grow the data warehouse and incorporate those. But guess what happens? All the while you're doing that, more of them are appearing. You either find ones you missed in the scoping exercise, or people are building them while you're aggregating them on the other hand. Maybe you could just say, well, take a laissez-faire approach. I'll leave it where it is. Ian was talking about 100 source systems with 1,500 feeds. Maybe we could just leave all that alone. Okay? The problem with that approach is, of course, people in your organization need data from different places. So guess what? They're pulling it from here, they're pulling it from there, they're cutting it and pasting it together themselves. If you're not very careful, you end up with a ride at your own peril situation. Of course, the answer is neither of those, both of them, and some other things. What's the key stuff? There are two real key groups of things. The first one is to apply innovative technologies. This is not the incremental build on what you had yesterday. This is the revolutionary stuff that drives real value. And in particular, using techniques that will enhance the way that you both store and deliver information. The second key thing is the business thinking. Now, this is interesting because Ian touched on this in his talk, where they're talking about empowering the user groups, empowering the user communities. And he gave a figure of 80-20 in terms of standard versus ad hoc, or central versus user control. That's for banking. We see that percentage applies pretty much across financial services and banking. In other sectors, it might be 70-30. In innovative, leading-edge organizations, it's as much as 50-50. Fully half of the information, whether you call it BI, MI, data visualization, whatever you call it, is governed and controlled by the users. So let's take a quick look at that. Okay, so you need all of these things, okay, because some of that key data, you do need to bring that together. But you can't analyze it effectively using yesterday's technology. Most of the databases we own and control are for storing data, and they're very, very good at that. But they're not optimized, most of them, and there are, of course, plenty of great products out there that do this, but most of the databases we own and control are not organized for asking questions. And yet most of what we do these days is ask questions. And actually, that number is going up. So you need a way of getting the data from where it is to where you need it very quickly, very easily. Okay, of course, this is vector-wise. And then leave everything else where it is. And we'll come back to what we do with that in a second. Okay, information presentation. Here's a standard report. There's a problem. This is simple sales and profit. There's nothing fancy about this. This is just really, really easy data. There's a problem with profitability in this organization. Okay. Can anybody hazard a guess what it is? Does anybody want to hazard a guess? You're all too eager to go for lunch. Okay. Other than spotting that there's one empty box, so there was obviously no sales for that intersection of region and product category, you can't tell very much from that. Now, we can change that, and we can do one of these. Well, at least now you can see what's moving and what's a near-death experience, but it still doesn't really tell you what's going on. There's a problem with profitability. What's the problem? Okay. Now we can see. We've got a whole problem here. Okay, this turns out to be tables. Mostly, it's unprofitable. Now, we've got something we can go and do. The visualization problem becomes acute at high volumes because we're not good at processing masses of similar information. The third thing then, data ownership and information access. we've always thought of databases as being two bits joined at the hip. The server that the thing runs on and the database itself. And because they're one and the same, they're kind of joined together, that's run for us by IT services, whatever you call it in your organization, okay? And of course, those people are also responsible for producing the bulk of the reports. This is what we call about the standard reports and such like. But the problem is that for every one unit of IT services, you've got way more domain experts out in the field. In the wider business, you have subject matter people who know what's going on, know what they want, know what they need, but they can't get it. If we take a view that you've got times one unit of IT service available, if you simply move the database and the reporting to the business, you can get times 100. Now, I don't mean that we're going to teach everybody in the business to be a DBA. That's not the point. But the point is, if the data owners actually own the data, there's a revolutionary concept. I meet IT people all the time say, no, we own the data. Thank you very much. That's our data. No, you look after it for somebody else. No, we own it. Okay? This is a mindset thing, and it's a real challenge, depending on the organization you're in, as to find out whether this is a culture change that is achievable. If you then not only allow them to create it, but also the publication goes back to that audience, then you can get huge additional value. Okay. So let's look at how we might put together a full analytics ecosystem, including big data, including all the stuff that's out there as well as the stuff that's in here, including all the stuff that we've already worked on as well as the things that we haven't. And as we go through this, this is hugely simplified, just so that we can go through the key points in today's session. And your path might be different. You could take a different view. You can join the dots in a slightly different way. The point is that you can do all of these things with the tools that are available. So let's look at the start point. Okay, so here's what we've already got. We've already got a data warehouse. We've already got a bunch of servers. We've got databases and spreadsheets, and we've linked them all together, and we've got all this stuff. We've already identified that there's a bunch of things that aren't linked. Maybe because we forgot them, maybe because they came up afterwards, maybe because the scope didn't allow, the budget ran out, all sorts of reasons. But some of this is really important to be able to analyze for the business. So we need to be able to grab that and pull it together into one place. Okay, so here is our machine to do that. Okay, vector-wise, because it's very simple and straightforward, as we mentioned before, and the point really is that it is geared for asking questions. So we join those things together, okay? The key parts. Now, we've got something that's left out of this puzzle. We've still got an orphan up at the top, and your journey might be different because you might have orphan servers or databases that you're not including in this. That's fine, and we'll come back to that in a second. Okay, conveniently, AXdude has an Hadoop connector, so we solve that piece of the puzzle straight away. If you've got one of those, you can pull it in. And then we need to look at the rest of our cloud information. Okay. And typically, we process that through EC2, Amazon Web Services, so that we get something that looks like an analytics source that we can then process. Okay, so we've now resolved the other things that we needed to do with data and got a set of sources. Now we need to do the analytics itself. Tableau Server is what we've been talking about before. It's self-service. Okay, the idea is that the user community can both build and deploy and consume the things that they want to know. So that gives us all of the key components we need to build the analytics out. So we can start joining these together. and service the user community. Now, some of these things won't apply. Some of these things will apply for you in a different order. It really doesn't matter, okay? Because there are a number of key underlying principles and processes that you can apply wherever you are, whatever you're doing. So, on the one hand, technologies. These technologies are revolutionizing the way that we can analyze and publish information. We're good at storing it. We've been doing that for years without problem. But how do we get it out of the store and into the hands of the people that need it most? From a business thinking point of view, this is where the real change is required, and this is where the culture shift needs to occur so that we can get the information out to the people and we can leverage the fact that we've got hundreds of times the number of people out there who own the data compared to the bottleneck that we've got, information services. Sometimes your journey will be heavy on the technology, and sometimes it will be heavy on the business. It doesn't really make any difference where you are right now. The point is that all of these things are available, and they are deployable, and they can, wherever your start point is, whether or not you've yet built a data warehouse, whether or not you've done any of these things, really doesn't make any difference. These are all things that you can take and do right now. Thank you very much.